Hello and welcome to Mr. Alvarez's virtual chemistry classroom. Today we'll be learning about adding and subtracting with significant figures. Our aim for today is how can we round values that have been added or subtracted to the appropriate number of significant figures. Here are some steps for adding and subtracting with significant figures. Step 1, we're going to look at the values that are being added or subtracted. Now, we are going to determine the number of decimal places for each value. So how many spots after the decimal point each of the original values has. Step 2, we're going to perform the mathematical operation, either addition or subtraction. And then third, we're going to round the final answer to the least number of decimal places. Remember, in the last video, when we multiplied and divided, we rounded to the least number of significant figures. Now, with addition and subtraction, we're going to round to the least number of decimal places. Let's do some practice problems together. For practice problem number 1, we will add 4.66 to 3.1. For the first step, we have to determine the number of decimal places each of the original values has. 4.66 has 2 decimal places, whereas 3.1 has 1 decimal place. Obviously, 1 decimal place is less than 2 decimal places, so our final answer will be rounded to 1 decimal place. Step 2, we perform our mathematical operation. In this case, it's addition. So 4.66 plus 3.1, and of course we get 7.76. Write down every number in your calculator. Now, when we round to the 1 decimal place, we start at the first decimal position, the 7. 1 decimal place, we put a box around the next decimal place. We look in the window, we see that 6 is 5 and above, so we're going to round up. So our final answer is going to be 7.8. And we box off our final answer. For problem number 2, we have 640.8 minus 627.03. First step, we determine the number of decimal places for each number. 640.8 has 1 decimal place. 627.03 has 2 decimal places. Once again, 1 is less than 2, so our final answer will be rounded to 1 decimal place. Step 2, perform our mathematical operation. 640.8 minus 627.03. Enter. Write down every number in your calculator. 13.77. Once again, 1 decimal place. We go to the 7. We put a box around the next number. In this case, it's also a 7. Since 7 is 5 and above, once again, we're going to round up. Our final answer becomes 13.8. For problem number 3, we have 18.640 plus 670.445. First step, once again, determine the number of decimal places for each value. 18.640 has 3 decimal places, and 670.445 also has 3 decimal places. They're the same number, so we're going to round our final answer to 3 decimal places. We perform our mathematical operation. 18.640 plus 670.445. We get 689.085. 3 decimal places, 3 decimal places. Our answer, of course, has 3 decimal places, so we don't have to do anything to it. And that sometimes will happen. The number comes out, and it is already rounded to the appropriate number of significant figures. Our final answer, 689.085. For problem number 4, we have 67.5 minus 0.009. Step 1, determine the number of decimal places for each value. 67.5 has 1 decimal place. and 0.009 has 3 decimal places. So we're going to round our final answer to 1 decimal place. Step 2, perform our mathematical operation, 67.5 minus 0.009. Write down every number that comes out of your calculator, 67.491. 1 decimal place, go to the 4, box off the very next number, which happens to be a 9. 9 is 5 and above, so we round up. This 4 goes up 1. Our final answer is 67.5. And we box off our final answer. For problem number 5, we have 3.458 plus 53.252. Step 1, determine the number of decimal places for each value. 3.458 has 1, 2, 3 decimal places. And 53.252 also has 3 decimal places. 3 and 3, same number. Our final answer will be rounded to 3 decimal places. Step 2, let's add them together. 3.458 plus 53.252. When we add those together, we get 56.71. That's what I see in my calculator. That's what you should see in your calculator too. But remember, 3 decimal places, 3 decimal places. We only have 2 decimal places here. So what we should do is add a 0 at the end. So now we have 3 decimal places. And that is our final answer. For problem number 6, 12.09 minus 6.7. First step, we find out that 12.09 has 2 decimal places, whereas 6.7 has 1 decimal place. So we will round our final answer to 1 decimal place. Step 2, let's subtract them. 12.09 minus 6.7. That gives us 5.39. 1 decimal place. Go to the 3, put a box around the 9. 9 is 5 and above. So 5.3 rounds up to 5.4. 5.39 rounds up to 5.4 with 1 decimal place. Problem number 7, we have 42.828 plus 67.4629. Step 1, we see that 42.828 has 3 decimal places, whereas 67.4629 has 4 decimal places. This answer will be rounded to 3 decimal places because 3 is a smaller number than 4. Our next step, let's add them together. 42.828 plus 67.4629. Write down every number that you get in your calculator. That's going to equal 110.2909. Round to 3 decimal places. So we start with the 2. That's our first decimal place. 1, 2, 3. Put a box around the next number, which is a 9. Higher than 5, so we round up. Our final answer, 110.291. With 3 decimal places. Finally, problem number 8. We have 3 values that we have to add together. We have 7,000.40 plus 6.2 plus 6.32. Step 1, same thing. We find out that the first number, 7,000.40, has 2 decimal places. 6.2 has 1 decimal place. And 6.32 has 2 decimal places. Out of all these numbers, we still go with the least number of decimal places. In this case, it will be 1. Step 2 is the same. We add all the numbers together, 7,000.40 plus 6.2 plus 6.32. write down every number that comes out of the calculator. That'll be 7,012.92. One decimal place. Box off the 2. 2 is lower than 5, so we round down. Our final answer, 7,012.9 is our final answer. Now remember, there are different rules with significant figures when you're multiplying or dividing than when you are adding or subtracting. For multiplication and division, you're going to round your final answer to the least number of significant figures. But when you're adding or subtracting, you're going to round to the least number of decimal places. So, multiplication, division, you're going to go least number of significant figures. For addition and subtraction, you're going to go least number of decimal places. Thank you for joining Mr. Alvarez's Virtual Chemistry Classroom. Today we learned how to add and subtract, and then round that final answer to the appropriate number of significant figures. Remember, when adding and subtracting, you're going to round to the least number of decimal places. Thank you again for joining us. Hope you learned something today. Please join us again soon.